Hello and welcome to this episode of Hospitality Talks. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Scott Reed, who is the CEO of Employee Services for Growth Partners. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. We've had some research recently conducted that we did together about employee engagement services. But for anyone out there who hasn't seen that research or doesn't know who you are, do you just want to give a brief introduction?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Katy. The Growth Partners are a payroll and pension business. We set it up about 5 years ago with a view of doing payroll and pensions very different and adding a huge amount of value to what is a traditionally commonly outsourced service that businesses will look to use. And that value is all around how many other employee benefits, employee engagement type services could we include at a really cost-effective way. And in essence, can you get all of these tools and services at the same price as what you would normally outsource your payroll for? So something that's commonly done, but ultimately not given the wide range and breadth of additional services and value-added services alongside it. We did that because both myself and the person who founded Growth Partners back in 2017, we both got, well, he had probably 20 years of experience and knowledge of the employee engagement sector, and I'd worked alongside him for the previous 10 years. So it really helped us, and we felt that it was a way of getting employee benefits and employee engagement services to smaller to medium-sized businesses that wouldn't traditionally invest in it.
It's interesting. Before I started CAM, a couple of jobs before, I ran a recruitment agency. Ran a recruitment agency, and of course, employee benefits was, it was a sort of buzz phrase that we used a lot of the time, and it encompassed holiday, maybe a gym membership. This is quite some time ago, remember? What is the difference between benefits and employment engagement services? What exactly is an employment engagement service?
I think it's a great question because it's massively misunderstood, and I think it means something different to everybody. I mean, even the white paper, the people that you interviewed doing the white paper, they've all got a slightly different take on what employee engagement is, which is really interesting to read. For me, employee engagement comes down to trying to achieve something within your business, right? And that sounds really vague, so I will explain. What I always talk to people about is, how can you unlock the discretionary effort from your employees? Okay. And that's the question that I pose myself, which is effectively, I've got employees working 9 to 5, or I don't know, 6 till 10 in a pub or a restaurant or whatever. And everybody has a set of tasks that they need to do during their shift or during their day's work. I personally have a to-do list that I write at the beginning of every day of the things that I want to achieve that day. And subconsciously, you have almost a level of acceptance of what looks good for the day. If I get to the bottom of that list, is that a good day? If I get the top 3 done because they're quite massive tasks, is that a good day? And in reality, everybody has this subconscious acceptance of what good looks like. And what I mean when I talk about unlocking that discretionary effort is, how do you get the individual to do the next 2 things on their to-do list, even though the end of their shift is there, or even though they've already had a really productive day? And you can't do that by management alone in terms of just asking them to do it. For a start, it's not right. Everybody's got to get the work-life balance. We are well beyond well, you work an extra hour now because that's just what's expected of you, right? That's not the culture that society sees as acceptable anymore, and for all the right reasons. But actually, it's about an individual caring passionately about what they do, the company that they work for, and wanting to go above and beyond. And I guess a couple of examples for me, it would be, it's clocking off time. I mean, whether we have a technical clocking off time or not is another question for another day. But ultimately, I can look at my to-do list and say, no, do you know what? There's 2 or 3 things that I still need to get done today because I don't want them to dictate or change what tomorrow looks like or the next working day. But for somebody else, it might be that element of, my job is to serve the food, but actually I've got 2 minutes whilst I'm waiting for the food to be ready from the chef, and I can see that there's, the dustbins are overflowing and need to be emptied. So actually, I'm going to take it upon myself to do that extra bit, when actually I could be completely justified in standing there and waiting for the food to be ready for me to serve. But actually, I'm wanting to help my colleagues. I'm wanting to go that step further. And that's what I see as this discretionary effort. I'm not waiting to be told by my manager to do something. I'm voluntarily doing it and going the extra mile.
So it's very much about using employee engagement services to create a positive culture within businesses where you are working as a team by choice, and actually you want as the employee to add as much value as the employer is adding to your life, essentially.
Absolutely. I think so many businesses, for all the right reasons, look at employee engagement as almost a list of employee benefits.
Yes, that's exactly my experience.
And what you can do is you can believe you're doing a truly amazing job for your staff, and you genuinely, you're convinced that you're doing everything right, because in front of you have a checklist of, do I do anything about emotional well-being? Do I pay people the right? Are people getting holidays more than statutory? What are all the things that we do? And you can go down this tick list and you could tick every single one of them and go, brilliant. Look how great we are as an employer. But actually, do you regularly pay them late? Do people wake up on payday and not know whether their money's going to be in their account first thing or whether it's going to be mid-afternoon? Now, that one act in itself undoes everything else that you're trying to do. And even if you get that right, do you actually create a culture whereby people understand why you're putting these benefits in place, what the benefits actually are to the employee? Because in reality, a really good employee benefit or employee engagement culture, there should be benefits to the employees, but also to the employer. And it's that double-handed approach of, why are we doing this? Are we communicating why we're doing it? And I guess more importantly, what's the strategy behind every element of it? There's no point ticking and saying we've got the most popular top 10 employee benefits. We've got them all. So what if they're not relevant to your,
or they're not being used because people don't
or they're
know
not being used?
Yeah.
And an example to that might be, oh, we do a cycle to work scheme. Yeah, but your staff might all live, literally 200 yards from the building. What benefit is that really doing? You're creating maybe a green culture and it fits with another strategy that you might have, but is it actually the right place for you to invest your money to support your staff? And conversely, people might have a cycle to work scheme in. As much, I know you like your bikes, but if I was to get on a bike, I'm talking about, that's a 50-mile journey into work every day. It's not realistic that cycle to work scheme is going to be something that actually motivates me. So finding the right benefits for your staff and having a strategy about what is it that you want to implement, why are you implementing it, can you then communicate that to all so that they understand what you're trying to do? And then ultimately, can you measure whether that's having an impact on your business or not? And for me, it's the strategy and the communication piece that takes it from a list of things that you can do to actually driving engagement and driving that unlocking of the discretionary effort. Because if the employee doesn't understand what you're trying to do and why, then you'll never unlock it.
And so I suppose this isn't just about attracting new staff, is it? I mean, there's some statistics I think that were in the white paper that we wrote together. It's said 149,000 hospitality vacancies at the end of last year, and you've got all of these fantastic initiatives like Hospitality Rising, who are going to come in and change the perception of the industry and make it a more attractive place to work. But presumably we all know that it is cheaper and easier to retain the staff that you've got than it is to bring on new staff. So does employee engagement have a place to sit in that area of hospitality as well, in the retention?
Absolutely. I think one of the people who was interviewed used the phrase that employee engagement services are an essential part of a business. And
Mm.
then they went on to say they're costly, but ultimately, if they're applied right, it's worthwhile. And I
The
think,
investment rather than a cost, yeah.
yeah, and I think the problem that you've got with employee engagement services, and it's a challenge that's been there for, well, since employee engagement benefits became a thing in reality, is so many businesses look at them as a drain on the bottom line
Mm.
because there's a £10,000 cost, or it doesn't matter what that is, whether it's 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, depending upon the size of the organization. Ultimately, people see it as, well, that's money off the bottom line, right? Straight away, we're not going to get a return on that. And the hardest thing to do if you're trying to sell it into somebody is to give them the tangible benefit from a monetary point of view that it's going to bring to their business.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, those businesses that adopt it and work it really well have stopped trying to monetize what it does for them, because ultimately they just know that over a period of time that their staff loyalty increases, that retention increases, that recruitment costs go down, and in the current, and not to mention productivity goes up,
Yes, of
right?
course.
So if you've got, I think the other thing that the white paper does is clearly link, but look, clearly talk about the link between happiness and productivity. If people are happy, they stay longer. It's also safe to assume that they're more productive when they're at work. They
Yeah.
create a greater level of customer service for the employee, for the customers. So that in itself has to mean happiness equals productivity, which has to equal the profitability, which ultimately is what every CEO and FD is after within their organization anyway. But probably not the first strategy that they put together to sort of demonstrate how they were going to be profitable in the first place.
Mm.
You know, they're much more likely to go and speak to a supplier about reducing costs or change supplier to get more margin in a product than they are thinking about, I need to invest in my staff because that will ultimately get us greater profitability. And the reason for that is because they are tenuous financial examples that you will give,
Yeah.
right? And you have to a certain extent, take a leap of faith, right? That by investing in this, you'll get a return. And I think the key thing that I also need to stress there is that if ultimately the management within your organization isn't supporting what you're trying to do by creating that culture, then please don't invest in it, because it will just be money off the bottom line. Because how it is communicated, how you then manage your staff, how you pay them properly on time, how you encourage them to save or make their money go further, all of those things are pointless if fundamentally you've got a bad manager running a site,
Yeah.
because that's the thing that overrides everything. So the management have to be on board with what the strategy is. So it's a top-down strategy that everybody needs to be engaged with. And one of the things that I've always found is, how do you make sure that all those managers are invested in it?
Yes.
And we all, as people managers, give our staff objectives. How many give them people objectives? In my opinion, every manager should have a people objective as much as a financial or a commercial one.
I agree. I wholly agree. And I think that we are, as an industry, changing for the better when it comes to looking after our people. But there is still a way to go. And obviously, having access to employment engagement services is one of the tools that we should all be looking at to recruit and retain. Scott, thank you so much for your time. I'm afraid that is all that we have time for, although I am going to come and personally pick your brains on employment engagement and see what we're doing right and wrong at CAM and see where we should be making some changes. But thank you so much for coming on Hospitality Talks.